In this video, we're going to talk about how the rules to a popular stand-up comedy routine have sort of ended up breaking the internet. Now, I'm talking about a bit that many of the most famous, engaging, and charismatic YouTube creators use to propel themselves to the top of the algorithm. At the same time, it's also the reason social media is a cesspool of misinformation and conspiracy theories. And to be honest, I'm a little hesitant to even record this video because the information I'm about to tell you might just make the problem worse, if only because it's so damned effective. I'm talking about yes and. It's both a theory of comedy and a game, and the rules are simple. When two comedians are on stage, they agree to begin every statement they make with the phrase yes and. The result ends up being hilarious and increasingly absurd the more times one comedian responds to another.
Let me get this straight. You're an interdimensional entity presenting itself in this physical form because it's the most recognizable portrayal of your kind that humans will be able to understand. Yeah, that's about right. If you guys saw how we exist in our base reality, your tiny monkey brains just wouldn't be able to process. We're just a bunch of territorial apes, man. Yeah, and we're more like abstract bodies of matter, contracting and expanding in relationship to the energy patterns of our ecosphere. Whoa. It's pretty sick.
That was Brent Pella and Blake Weber doing a yes and skit. And here is Brent talking about the mechanics of how yes and works on stage.
If I were to say, if we both walk out onto stage in an improvised comedy show, and I say, "Nice sombrero," it's up to you to accept the reality that you're wearing a sombrero and expand on that reality. So maybe when I say "nice sombrero," a yes and response from you could be something along the lines of, "It used to be your mom's," right? And so now you've accepted that you're wearing a sombrero and you've expanded the scene in a really funny way, because now we get to find out how and why you came to be wearing my mom's sombrero. So it leads to more openings in the scene and it allows the relationship to evolve.
That last bit about allowing relationships to evolve, it's key. Yes and is funny. It works in improv, and it also works on social media, where the results are decidedly not quite as funny. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot. You've probably noticed over the last several years that the internet has become awash in absurd conspiracy theories and general misinformation. From the rise of QAnon to wellness grifters, anti-vaxxers, school shooting deniers, 9/11 truthers, one seemingly invariable fact is that conspiracy theories get more complex and absurd over time. One person posts a video about well-documented lapses in pharmaceutical company ethics. Someone else will add to the intrigue with a dash of, like, a JFK assassination cover-up. Well, the next person might link to how fluoride is part of a government mind control program. Now, while any given conspiracy theorist will have their own specific combination of theories that work for them, the point is that the theorists combine these theories. Maybe you remember an old video game from a few years ago called Katamari Damacy, where the main character is essentially a giant sticky ball that picks up whatever it touches until it is an impossibly large rolling behemoth sticking to entire continents of junk. That's sort of the way conspiracy theories work. Once you start with one, they grow and add until more and more components get together, and then the conspiracy connects to all other conspiracies. Now, to some degree, this effect occurs in any set of human interactions, but it gets supercharged on the internet, where the algorithm acts a lot like a stand-up comedy stage, where you either get booed off or you're ushered into ever increasingly bigger and more successful stages in front of more and more audiences, and with, this is key, more and more popular performers who are playing similar games. Here's comedian Meredith Lynch.
Because when you're doing improv, you really want to keep building and you want to be open to the things, because you're up there with other people, that your team members, your scene partners throw at you.
And Brent Pella again.
So saying yes accepts whatever was just shared as truth and confirms the reality of the situation. and then the word and expands on it. So that's where you add to whatever was just shared.
Now, to go back to my metaphor of the internet as a giant stand-up stage, the mechanisms for success with the algorithms are actually sort of straightforward. If someone goes on a podcast and the host believes that, say, electromagnetic frequencies are scrambling our brains, their guest and audience has two options. They can say, "No, please provide evidence," or they can agree and add to the bit. Saying no stops the conversation, while saying yes and moves the story forward. Yes and is an opportunity to click on the next related video. While the algorithm doesn't necessarily have any strict agenda around any particular piece of content, social media platforms do want their viewers to keep their eyeballs on the programs. So any good and effective algorithm will see a yes and reaction to signal to recommend other content that links together.
The opposite of yes and would be no but. And that's not very conducive for entertainment. That's not conducive for even just a conversation. In a conversation, you don't want a lot of no but, because that creates conflict, it creates tension, and it doesn't allow for play to happen. So in comedy specifically, the yes and theory really allows the runway to be built even further for whatever the scene is. It allows for more potential expansion into absurdity, into finding out the relationship of these characters, and allows for more opportunity for jokes and laughter than immediately going against what was just shared.
In other words, on the internet, doing anything other than building on the previous person's ideas will stop the algorithm from recommending your content. It will stop any sort of fact-checking. It stops anyone from taking a moment and wondering if something is actually true. Because truth doesn't matter to the algorithm that's trying to keep your eyeball on the computer screen. Now, of course, there are always people who are better at improv than others. Is it any surprise that Joe Rogan, who got his start in comedy, is the top influencer in the world? With 13 million subscribers just on his podcast, he sets the global conversation in this universe. His entire shtick is playing yes and with a huge variety of guests while keeping a straight face. And notably, he never really pushes back on people, he just adds to the conversation. And here's a clip of Abby Richards from Media Matters outlining exactly how this all works.
Brand Jones is now broadcasting a show on Rumble. Joe Rogan has the biggest podcast on Spotify. Tucker Carlson gets millions of views on Twitter. And there are dozens of popular conspiracy theory channels on YouTube. These grifters are constantly cross-pollinating. Tucker goes on Brand's show, then Brand goes on Rogan, then Rogan goes on Jones, and Jones uses his show to direct his viewers back to Tucker.
We're very, very proud of you, Tucker, and your team, and we salute you.
It's a circuit of conspiracy grifters all going on each other's platforms so that they can sell their viewers merch and subscription.
The grifters have an entire ecosystem of positive reinforcement, and the only way to play the game and remain relevant is to keep the tall tales spinning. It works because it's entertaining, not because it promotes critical thinking. Which brings me back to my original hesitation with even putting this video together in the first place. Because I'm decidedly not a yes and person. I've spent most of my career poking holes in charlatan ideologies, throwing no's and buts into conversations all over the internet, and it is not a great business model for social media recognition. It's a great way to lose fans and not influence people. It's a great way to end the fun that people were having watching an everlasting improv routine. Honestly, it's hard to see a world where yes and doesn't work because I think that sort of positive reinforcement is hardwired into our brains. We like affirmation, and the last few years prove that humans will follow the likes and shares regardless of reality. Eventually, every comedy routine ends when it gets so absurd that it can't go on anymore. Eventually, reality sets in, and the Ponzi scheme of absurdity collapses. I just don't quite know when that will be. In the meanwhile, this type of yes-anding is also a recipe that pretty much anyone could try to start their way grifting their way to likes, comments, powerful friends, and algorithmic notoriety. I just hope you have the sense to stop and see if the game that you're playing, if you're doing this, is making the world a fundamentally better place or a worse one. Thanks so much for watching my video on Yes and if you could just give a like and a share and yes and this video to internet success, I would really appreciate it. And remember, you can get early access to my videos on my Patreon channel. They come out like usually several weeks before they appear on YouTube. And you know, it really helps this sort of journalism continue. So from PokeyBear LLC in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates.